program. So you can check the link in the chat box later. Okay. Okay. For information, this workshop will be conducted by Mrs. Suhaila Merican. A little biodata about her. Mrs. Suhaila Merican is an adjunct professor and alumnus of the Faculty of Food Science and Technology UPM, having 29 years of experience at Nestle Malaysia, starting as a trainee. She was later offered various positions, including production manager, factory manager, and planning manager at Nestle's supply chain. She retired in 2014 and to this day has continued to serve as a lecturer at FSTM for subject FST 5601, covering the topic of food quality, TQM, ISO 9000, and supply management since retiring from Nestle. Please correct me, ma'am, if I'm wrong.
Betul tu. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So moving right along, it is now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker. Please welcome Ma'am Suhaila Merican. So this session is yours.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you, Marziana. Good morning, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. It is a pleasure, for me it is an honor for me actually to be able to do this workshop for lecturers and for so many of you as well, not only for the FSTM lecturers. I understand that a number of you are from other faculties. So that's really wonderful. I am not sure what your expectations are, but we'll figure it out as we go along. If I may, we may be interrupted occasionally when a few more turn up later, but I think that's absolutely fine. To be successful in this workshop, we should have a lot of discussion, questions especially, and I will do my best to try and explain. Okay, so at this point, do you have any questions? No? Okay, so I will share the screen. Good. So this here. Right, can everyone make that out?
Yes.
Good, all right. So the intention of this workshop, or the general objective of this workshop, is to try and encourage all of you to use QC tools in classrooms. Okay, it sounds a bit weird, but I know that some of you already do this, but there is a very big objective at the end of it, and to see whether we can apply it effectively. So that's probably the difference, and the whole objective is to see whether we can encourage, or the word is enable, critical thinking, to make your students think harder in terms of being able to respond and answer to you, and to also have an organized way of thinking, systematic thinking, we call it. So these are ideas to be used in class to encourage effective communication by your students, and it will help if you apply the tools. And the tools can be for problem solving, decision making, or improvements where you want to try and do some improvements. Now, the workshop is designed to, well, let me put it very simply. I will suggest ideas on how you can use the tools, okay, and how it can help to improve and how it can connect to effective communication. And this is to be done in class. But however, you will be the one to decide on the application and its effectiveness. So it's very important to just bear with me in terms of what these QC tools are and how it can be applied. And let's see how we can share ideas in terms of how useful they can be. This workshop was suggested when the faculty people were talking about how some of our students, at least the ones we know in FSTM, had a lot of difficulty competing with the private university students. And they would usually not be selected when it involves being interviewed during for a career position or for an internship position. And this we felt was very disappointing. And the feedback was some were not very confident, some were not did not know how to project themselves, and were not able to communicate effectively. So with that general idea in mind, my suggestion was why don't we try something new and try to encourage effective communication. And the suggestion is to integrate QC tools with effective application into classes. So it's hoped that there will be certain benefits to students. But it's important that you are convinced that that there will be benefits. So the focus today for you is to make sure that you will benefit from the knowledge and from the application of the tools first. Okay. Now, generally there will be benefits, if you look at it very simply, particularly when everyone uses it, when it's used very commonly in classes, across the faculty, during your meetings, And however, it all depends to what extent you wish to apply the tool. So there are the basics. The basics are you have the knowledge of the QC tools and how to use them. So this will be of benefit to the individual. If the students can apply these tools effectively, they are familiar with the terms, so this can only accelerate their assimilation into industries in their future. Because most industries, if not most, if not all, use them. Thirdly, you have a certain level of effectiveness when you apply and when you understand the usefulness of these tools. These techniques will, if you use them well, it will reflect upon the person's approach to problem solving, the person's communication, to be more critical minded, to be able to question situations when there are gaps for improvement. Okay, any questions at this point? Okay, we move on. Dr. Rishda, are you trying to say something?
No, I'm okay, fine. Right. I guess these tools can also be used for other subjects, not just for food science and technology, right?
Yes, the tools are very general, and they are just, for example, for data collection, you can put it together and it makes into a visual presentation for you to analyze further or to present it to your, during your lectures, for example. So it is not specific for a particular subject. It is a generic tool. The intention is it is meant to have quality in data management. Okay. So this workshop is going to focus on what the QC tools are. And we're going to look at the 7 basic QC tools. So bear with me if you are already very familiar with it. Then the emphasis is on questioning techniques. When you make use of the tools, you question, you make use of questions. And then I'm going to only pick out a few of these 7 QC tools. My favorites are the control charts, the prioritizing and decision making, which is the Pareto chart, we have some problem solving tools, yeah, and to be able to make use of the cause and effect diagram, which is a problem solving tool, it is, we need to practice a little bit in terms of a brainstorming process. Okay, so we'll do an exercise on that. And then in summary, we will figure out which tools would be useful for us and how it would be applicable or how it can be used in your project management, in your classrooms, in certain subjects, in certain general communications to students, for example. And then there's also a way of organizing all the tools and combining it to be able to use it in terms of continuous improvement, for example. Okay. So what are QC tools? There are 7 QC tools. There are 7 basic ones. And frankly, if you Google QC tools, you'll find several, sometimes hundreds of them. There are all sorts of variations of the tools. And what we do is we will just focus on a few. But let me just run through what the 7 QC tools are. For example, the check sheet. Okay, it's just a table. And let's say you have to do a lot of counting in project management, right? And you need to count the number of, I don't know, data collectors will sit in the fields and they will count the number of birds or insects in the field, right? So they want to do a study of population, for example. So they start tallying what they observe and how many are found in a certain period. So that's your check sheet. You have a scatter diagram. The scatter diagram is to see whether there is a connection or a relationship between 2 variables, right? So you're not sure. And when you put the X and Y axis of these 2 variables together and you put it into this graph, you might see some kind of relationship. You might see a trend, you might see clusters, yeah? You can go by location. For example, at one point in the pandemic, people were looking into areas where the infections were highest. So they would count the number of incidences by location and they would form these clusters. But now we don't care anymore, right? It's all over the place. Then you have Pareto. So the Pareto is basically a bar graph, but when you look at Pareto graphs, you will notice that there will always be this high bar chart on the left, and then it tapers down until they have the smallest one on the right. Okay, so this gives you some kind of view in terms of the different categories of issues which you are trying to measure, and it tells you which are the ones which are the highest impact or has the highest count, which is pretty obvious in this graph. Okay, so we'll talk about this a bit more, and the Pareto, which I find quite useful, but a little bit difficult to use when you're preparing the graphs. Yeah, are we following? Can we follow? I hope you can all see it well. Talk to me.
That's okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, backwards. Right, then you have the cause and effect diagram. Cause and effect. Every action has a reaction. Some genius said that, right? So you have a cause and effect. And the causes can be categorized into larger areas like man, method, procedure, and the environment. And these causes are all listed down in relation to a particular effect or particular problem. Okay, so this is a very useful diagram to help organize your thoughts in terms when there is a situation where there are many possible causes for a problem. Then you have a histogram. The histogram is another bar chart, right? So you have a distribution curve, right? You're familiar with the bell curve and all that. It's similar to that. So when you want to do a population study of the ages of the students in the university, so you will find the average of them is right in the middle, where maybe most of them are between the 20 and 25 years old, right? So, but you will have some exceptions. I used to have a classmate in UPM years ago, and he was about 60 something then. So he was an army officer, and he was given the opportunity to study food technology with us. So he was probably that little bar right at the end of the graph. A flowchart. A flowchart is a process. I can't tell you enough about process flows, okay? And if you can visualize a process flow can be something like a production process, how to make a product, yeah, from raw materials to the finished product. It can be a supply chain. It can be from the factory sending stocks to the warehouse and until it gets to the consumer, right? It can also be things like a procedure. So if you draw out a procedure from the initiation of the request, from the form, and then it follows through in terms of what are the next steps. You know, if you're involved in any kind of like you want to do a claims process, or you want to do a payment, a procedure to pay a bill in UPM, and if you try to list out the activities necessary to do that, and then you have approvals and second approvals, and sometimes when you draw it out, we realize that it has become so bureaucratic, you know, if you do not see the whole process, and it takes weeks and months sometimes to get a simple approval done. Okay. Finally, we have the control chart. We have the control chart where you have to look at the variation of a process. So this is typically like when you're doing a production, when you're producing products and you want the product, the food to be as consistent, to be produced as consistently as possible, right? You want the quality to be as consistent as possible. So you can take samples and you measure the net weight or the taste profile or anything that qualifies as the quality. You plot it, and over time, you will see whether there is a variation or not. Anything organic or food and all, they are never perfect, right? So they're bound to be variations. So the idea of variation is whether it is in control or not, whether it is acceptable or not for your consumers, for your standards. Now, you can, as I mentioned, there are 100 tools available in quality management. Yeah, many of it used for continuous improvement projects, project management, total quality management. The list can be quite overwhelming, but the basic tools, however, can be probably the most common and probably the best and the most flexible. Now, if you combine the use of these tools with questioning techniques, you will have some very powerful tools. Questioning techniques. Your lecturers, and you ask questions all the time. Now, what sort of questions do you ask during your lessons? Anyone?
And open-ended questions like what you expect from the class, things like that.
Yep, but what do you normally ask the class after your lecture?
Of what they understand about the subject.
So what do you understand of the subject? That's a good question. What if I asked, do you understand? What would the student say?
They probably say just yes or no.
Yeah. So it ends up being a very closed question. and it makes it difficult for you to understand, and you don't really have any clear idea, and you might not be entirely convinced whether they do understand or not. So when we have a need to ask more, we need to probe questions more. It's not only lecturers, but there are many other careers that rely on effective questioning techniques. Can you think of some careers, some people who use a lot of questions to get further clarity? Anyone?
Maybe someone was working with marketing or things like that, about, asking.
And what sort of questions would they ask, Sharifa?
Perhaps what they want about the products, what they like, what they dislike, and things like that.
Okay. Yes, very good. Anyone else? What about investigative kind of questions? Who would be asking questions like that?
Police.
Police, when you want to find out more information in terms of what happened when you called the police to your house. Yes. There can be doctors. Yeah. When you go see the doctor and say you're not well, is that enough for him to get the medicine for you? So he has to ask you a lot of questions in terms of, where do you hurt? What sort of pain is it? When was the last time you ate? And he goes on and on before he actually comes to a particular decision in terms of deciding what it is. Journalists, they ask a lot of questions these days, right? They will find out, like, you said this last month. Why are you saying this now? So what has changed? Okay, so questions. It's amazing how we have to ask so many of these questions, and there are techniques involved, and yet we're not taught how to use them effectively in many of our careers. So you know of closed and open-ended questions, right? So you have the how, the what, the when. But when you ask things like, can someone give me a closed question? What do you start with? Do you understand? Remember that one? So when you ask students, do you understand? It becomes a very closed question. It's nothing wrong asking that, but when you ask open-ended questions first, and then you follow with a closed-ended question, that means you are confirming that that this is the process that you're looking at. For example, you can ask probing questions, not only on the hows and whats, but you can ask whys. You can ask several whys, and in probing questions or in problem-solving questions, they ask the whys 5 times, they say. And it's usually useful for problem solving, for quality improvement, yeah, for troubleshooting. For example, the pizza arrived cold. Yeah. Why did the pizza arrive cold? Anyone?
Delivery guy probably comes very late.
Say that again.
The delivery guy.
Yeah. So it's delivered late. And why is it delivered late?
Maybe traffic jam.
And can I ask another why? Do you think I will get a clearer answer? Why is there a traffic jam? It doesn't work that way, isn't it? So when it's late, and that might be the main cause of the cold pizza. So if it's still unclear, you can continue with the questions of why until you get something more specific, and then perhaps you can be able to deal with the issue at hand. So sometimes when you have several open questions in terms of how did you do it, how did you bring the pizza over, when did you start sending the pizza over, you ask open questions, and then you go into probing questions in terms of why did you send it late, why, and you continue with the whys until you cannot get a logical answer after that. Okay, and then you close the questions by saying, so you left late and that is why the pizza is cold, is that right? And if he says yes, then you sort of solved your issue at that point. There is just an example. Okay, so when you string the open questions towards the probing questions, towards the closed questions, you call this the funnel effect. Yeah, so it sort of works in terms of this degree, from open to probing to closed questions. So this can be quite useful in terms of finding out more information, particularly when there is some problem or a troubleshooting thing that you want to address. There are other questions that you could ask, and we call it the 4W and 1H. And another one is the is and is not, by establishing the is and the is not. The 5W and 1H is a little bit similar to the general open questions, but you can ask what is the issue, and you're asking the person to get the problem addressed clearly. When he says that the pizza is cold, you ask, what do you mean that the pizza is cold? And he says, maybe it's delivered late. So you get more information as you ask these questions. You can ask the who in terms of who is responsible for it, the driver, the delivery, the pizza company. Yeah. When did you discover the problem? Where did you discover the problem? Why is the pizza cold? How often is the problem occurring? So it helps in terms of being able to put all this information together and to see whether collectively puts you in a better position to get a decision on what to do next. There is also a way to, if it is a more complex issue, for example, then you categorize your issue into the what is and what is not. So what is in this case is the cold pizza. It is not a hot pizza or a damaged pizza, okay, or the wrong flavored pizza. It is, for example, with who it is referring to the pizza company. It is the delivery boy. It is not the pizza company. It is not some other. It is not the traffic jam that's causing it. And it goes on from the where to the when to the how. You are establishing issues where you can say that you are qualifying that the product is all under the listed under the is. And you are qualifying that these are not the ones that are involved in this particular problem. It's a bit weird, isn't it? But I think the best way to teach this is to try it. Now, this is the case of the breakfast cereal complaint. I was in a breakfast cereal production plant, okay? And breakfast cereals is produced in the Shah Alam factory, and we have these main 4 main varieties, okay, and they are all packed into a paper pouch, and then it goes into these boxes. These boxes come flat from the supplier, right, and they are actually identical. And it's just the different printing that varies from one variety to the other. So there is a case of the breakfast cereal where I received several complaints about an open flap. So these open flaps were reported from several of our salesmen who were and they said that most of them come from the supermarkets. Okay, so generally, let me put it out for you in a statement that salesman complains that the conflict boxes were found with open flaps on the shelves in supermarkets. Now, I want you to write down what is the is and what is the is not in this particular case. Okay, and then can you identify a couple of questions you would like to ask me to find the cause of this issue? Boleh? So what's going to happen is, if I can find, right. Okay, Zoom has a breakout room. I'm going to split you guys up into, how many are there? 23. We're going to break up into maybe 4 groups, right? And you just do those 2 questions for me. What is an is, what is an is not in this particular case? And can you agree on a couple of questions to ask me? The objective is to find out the cause. You need more information to solve this problem, yes? Okay, are we ready?
Yes.
All right, here we go. We're going to go into breakout rooms. The rooms will be at random, yeah? Yes. So, okay, number 3 here. If you look at that, you will see that it is an outlier. It falls out of the control limit. Yeah. What do you think this is? What do you think this means?
Something is out of the norm.
It is out of the norm. There might have been something wrong. So it would be a good time to actually look at that specific time to actually find out what went wrong. Maybe there were changes in the specific gravity of the cereal. Maybe there were something blocking the filling machine. Yeah. So it would be a good time to check that out. And what they do is they will look at samples before and after that period as well to actually verify to see whether there is a bigger problem or not. Okay, so when things are running very well, everything falls under the upper and lower control unit. You can also consider trying to narrow the upper control limit or the lower control limit. So if you have a very good machine and they have, all these process controls, computerized process controls, you end up having very low variations of the product. Okay, so where can you use this? Can you move? Yeah. Where can we use this? For example, if there's a lot of data and where we want to check to see whether it is how it behaves over time, we can do a monitoring of the process to check for consistency. Yeah, and we can test the variation of a product profile. For example, when you try at different concentrations of coffee, for example, what would be the acceptable levels, which is maximum, acceptable levels, which are minimum. Okay, and there may
Puan
be
Suhaila,
reasons. Yes.
sorry to interrupt.
Not at all.
But I'm just like wondering, how can like we determine the upper limit and the lower limit if we're talking about, in terms of students' assessments?
Would you expect students to always achieve 100%? No, right? So there will always be some kind of range which you want to establish. So the university will probably give you a minimum, a range, an expected target for you to achieve. And the expected target reflects upon your performance, I guess, as a teacher, as a lecturer. So these limits could be what is dictated by standards in your organization. It could be like in the case of a product, it is based on regulation requirements, for example. If it is a product, there has to be a limit in terms of acceptability. That means if your students' results are well below 50%, so it is something for you to do in terms of addressing it, just like the other control chart I showed. What are we going to do about that particular outlier? Yeah, and how are we going to fix it? How are we going to address so that it doesn't happen again? I say it because this is a particular problem. But when you're dealing with people and their performance, it might start off with looking at the behavior in terms of or that particular subject which that person has found difficulty in understanding. Okay, so the upper limits and the lower limits can be for you to determine. It can be regulated, it can be decided by an organization, or it can be based on your own standards. So if you want to have very high performance of your students' assessment, then make a very tight control chart. And have that average be higher than 75%. For example. Did I answer your question? Did I try to answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You can have things like, how will you make a procedure and what is it that you can declare on your product? How can you commit to the 2 minutes of cooking with your Maggi mee? How do you think that they decided? So they would probably have to do a lot of checking and controlling to make sure that the product can be cooked within this acceptable limits of this 2 minutes. Next, we do prioritizing and decision making. Okay, decision making can be an underestimated skill. Yeah. Sometimes you can be faced with what seems to be so many issues and you don't know which to address first. Unless the information is organized and made visual, you make it transparent, only then can you make what we call a best balanced choice. Now in prioritizing, when we talk to students, for example, in terms of how much work they have to, or your own workload, for example. Imagine an apple tree, and imagine each apple will represent the students' class assignments, the exams, all the stuff that they have to complete and do within a specific time. Most of it all will be time imposed, isn't it? So using this apple tree analogy, what do you think the sweet fruit, the bulk, the low-hanging fruit, what do you think they represent in a student's need to do all his work and his achievement within a semester? What do you think? And what would you advise your students to focus on to do well in the remaining semester? So let's say there's a student who is not doing so great, okay? So what would you suggest? What would you advise the student? Study hard, do more. Any ideas?
Maybe ask which particular topic or section that they need help with.
Yes. Yes. Would the tree, would all the apples in the tree, for example, represent which would be the ones that will give you the A's, which would be the ones that are the bulk of the 80% that they have to achieve in terms of being able to fulfill all the criteria for their assessments? And what would there be some ideas what low-hanging fruits there would be in classrooms assessments? Any ideas?
Perhaps maybe the low-hanging fruits, students will get like maybe B or C or something like that, or perhaps they are not really active in the class.
Yeah.
Am I answer the question?
Yeah, but the low-hanging fruits could be what could they do when they are only achieving something like the B's and C's, and the student wants to do a bit more, and what would be the areas that they could do in terms of that could represent the low-hanging fruit? For example, it might be just an additional paper that they all have to write, and you could include an extra paper for them to do, and that might help with them to be able to achieve a higher score. Yeah. And getting them to, before the semester starts, getting them to focus on the bulk of the fruit. Oh, when you have new students, and telling them that this is how you manage the whole semester, because a lot of it is going to be the bulk of the fruit. 80% of the assignments, 70% of it will be assignments, and 10% of it is going to be attendance, something like that. So make sure that they fulfill all these things so that it covers the bulk of the achievements that they want to achieve. Okay, something like that. What I'm trying to say is that get them to prioritize, get them to refer to what we call the Pareto, or the 80-20 rule. For example, when we have an issue at a restaurant and we have a lot of complaints. So what this restaurant did was they compiled all the complaints into different categories. They put them into price, into portions, into wait time. They tried to put them all together. And then they did this Pareto chart. And in the Pareto chart, it tells them that 80% or 80% of it is because of complaints about the food being overpriced. There were also complaints about small portions, 70% of it. Okay, so looking at this, it makes sense for the restaurant because they have to do something very quickly, right? They have to address this issue very quickly. Otherwise, they lose more sales. So they will focus on reviewing their prices, reviewing their portions, yeah, and then once if they can get that improved, then they will slowly look into the other complaints later about things which are not too clean or too noisy, or food is not too fresh. The approach is, the idea is that 80% of the effects, 80% of the issue is probably due to 20% of the causes. Okay, so that is the emphasis that we usually need to address. So particularly when cases when resources are limited, time, we don't have the people, we don't have the capability, then we need to look at where the major focus should be. So we look at what is causing, what is the major issues, and try to fix that first. Okay. Other ways of doing it is also by looking at SWOT. Looking at just a comparison of strengths and weaknesses. I don't teach very often, but I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses. I tend to go on a bit, so I have to make sure that I limit myself in terms of doing a time for each slide. I look into the time, I look into the notes to make sure that I keep to a particular time all the time. You can do a SWOT analysis of students in terms of their overall ability, their communication skills, and take advantage of what of their strong communication skills, for example. Be aware of their weaknesses, for example. If they want to do career planning, what should they do and how should they network? And there are many examples which you can use with the SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The restaurant industry, you have an analysis in a restaurant that can be done to determine areas for improvement. Okay, so what ideas that they can look at and improve, and be aware of certain threats that could be a problem for them. All right, there could be many legal issues in the restaurant industry. You can do a SWOT analysis for when you're doing new products, a new product development, or you're introducing something new and you're not sure whether this is going to be acceptable or not to customers or to students or to your peers. This particular example, the gluten-free cookie dough, was an old item that we were considering importing from Europe. And because it was established in Europe, so they started to, before they decided to import, they decided to have a look at the issues. And because it was, they knew that there were many difficulties with the managing a very wet kind of cookie dough because of contamination and all that. Eventually, it didn't really take off. But after they did the SWOT analysis, they brought in a very small quantity to sort of test it out in the market. And good thing, it didn't really do very well. Can you think of any ideas, any other ideas SWOT can be used?
In terms of being an academician in UPM.
Yeah, or for your personal assessment as well?
Yep.
Okay.
Maybe
Next.
the faculty SWOT as well.
Yes, that's right. Yes. So whenever there are new things to be planned, it's usually good to do a SWOT to have everyone be on the same page, to know that there are going to be these weaknesses, to know that there are going to be this opportunity that we can take advantage of. Yeah. So when you have a huge team in your department or in your faculty or in your class, it's good to actually do this analysis first before you step and make these changes. Right, problem solving. Sometimes, not everything is a problem. right? And not everything has to be fixed. Sometimes it is a decision. Sometimes it just requires a decision to be made. Sometimes it is a whole lot of issues and you need to address it like a situation first. So there are such things as a situation analysis, a decision-making analysis, and then you can do, and if you're clear that it is a problem to be fixed, then you do a problem solving, you apply as problem solving tool. You can ask why 5 times. Customer is complaining about the service. Why is customer complaining about the service? Because the customer order took too long. So why did the customer order take too long? Because there was bottleneck in the kitchen. Why is there a bottleneck in the kitchen? Because of capacity. Why is there a capacity issue in the kitchen? Because we don't have enough people. Not everybody is trained to do everything. So why is that? We don't have any cross-training kind of training. Yeah. So maybe if that is where you want to stop and address it, then you talk about looking into areas where you want to fix it. Okay. You can also look into asking the 5 whys to the conflicts. Customer is complaining about Nestle conflicts. Why? Because the box flap keeps opening. Why does the box flap keeps opening? Well, the glue doesn't work. And then you start looking into the glue. And then you start looking into conflicts. And then you start doing a fix. The cause and effect diagram. This is also called a fishbone diagram because it looks like a fish, right? At the end of the fish, at the head of the fish, you see the problem statement. And it has a noun and an adjective, a coffee. And it is, what sort of coffee is it? It is a bad coffee. If you can qualify that better into a better problem statement, like it is a bitter coffee, it is a thin coffee, all right? It is a contaminated drink, then it makes it more specific in terms of addressing it. Now, all these other lines where you have people, procedures, material, method, and equipment are referring to categories of possible causes. So it comes as just a simple fishbone, and then you make this idea generation process. You ask your friends in terms of what could cause the bad coffee. And somebody says, oh, I think there was not enough training. So you can put training into procedure. Somebody says, oh, there was too much water or not enough grounds. Then you can put it under procedure as well. All right. And then when you say the machine was not producing hot enough water, then you can put it under equipment. Okay, so you don't have to stick to man, method, machinery, material, environment. You can put anything specific, but so long as it is high enough and it can categorize and it can just help you. All this is just meant to help you put the possible causes to list it down, and you see it in a visual way. Okay, so it's good to start with a clear problem statement. The problem statement here is complain about the service. The problem statement here is coffee, and what kind of coffee. It is a bad coffee. But if it is, as I said, it helps if you have a clearer description. So we use the fishbone diagram to look for the most probable cause. It doesn't mean you're going to fix it straight away. You're going to do the most probable cause. And when we do a fishbone, it's usually good if we ask for as much ideas of what could possibly cause it. Okay, so to be able to do that, we do a brainstorming exercise. Okay, and in brainstorming, it actually complements, it is actually idea generation. You want a new product development, for instance, let's do a fishbone analysis. Okay, so the process, some of you may have done this, but the process is actually like a round robin. So you have people around a table and you ask about, tell me what you would like to see as a new product. So you need to make sure at the end of the fish head too, there must be a goal. People must be clear about what the objective is for the goal. What is the objective? Let's do a idea for a new product development. Can somebody suggest the objective? Can someone suggest an objective for a new product development? For a new product? What would you like to see as a new product? Or a new program for class? Anyone? Let's say we want to produce a new cereal. Okay, so a new cereal, or is that too difficult to produce? Any ideas?
Can we have frozen food for working mothers?
A frozen food for working mothers. Okay, good. Okay, so we're going to have a brainstorming idea for new product development. So if we tom yum seasoning. Okay, let's agree on a frozen food. Let's do a frozen food. Stop share. Right, let's do a frozen food. So imagine all of us are sitting together in one big circle, okay? And the facilitator will ask, Dr. Shida, what frozen food would you like to suggest? Give me an idea. All of you, get ready. I'm going to ask you next. Shida, what do you think?
Frozen food, maybe frozen veggies, like for babies, is it?
Frozen. You tell me. You tell me.
But the right idea just now for the mother or for the children?
So let's say that the frozen food for the mother, yeah, for the family. Let's say for the family. Okay.
For the working mother.
Yes. Okay. Working mother. All right.
So we want something. So we want something that fast, that can just be, insert into the microwave, but
excellent.
Still,
yes. So it's
healthy as well.
It has to be microwavable, right? It has to be healthy.
Air fryable.
Air fryable. Yep.
But it should have the similar taste like what we have from the restaurant, perhaps.
Okay. It has to be
a complete meal.
A good taste.
Yep, a complete meal.
It has to be a complete meal. What else?
Mengenyangkan.
It has to be ready-made.
At reasonable price, perhaps.
Reasonable price. Okay,
long shelf life.
It has a long shelf life.
As natural as possible.
It is as natural as possible. Can I tell the person natural? Oh, that's not possible. It cannot be as natural as possible. What happens when you criticize a person at this point?
I maybe will find another person or another company.
Yeah. Okay. The idea is yes, go on.
Try to justify the reason that it is actually doable.
Yeah, but at this point when you're brainstorming, you should just put down all the crazy ideas as far as possible, and then only do you when everybody runs out of ideas. Yeah. So anyone else? Somebody will say pass. I don't know. I can't think anymore. And it goes on and on until everybody says that's it. I have no more suggestions. Then we start looking at the big whiteboard, and look at all the suggestions where it says ready-made. Then we try to organize it. We put it into a procedure. We put it in like method, for example. We put it into, if it were man, I would put it into a man. I would say that it would come from maybe a reasonable company or, you know, established company. What about complete meal? That means it has to pass the nutritional levels of it. Then I would organize it into still into the procedure or the content. Instead of environment, I would put the content of the product. Yeah, so it would be organized into a fishbone, for example, and allowing you to drill down into certain things which you want to use as objectives for getting this product done. Now, in fishbone analysis, it is usually done for problem solving, but you can actually change it into a potential problem of when you're trying to introduce a new product and you are worried whether you have all the controls in place and you want to just get ideas generated to see whether you have covered all your bases before you say launch the new product. Okay, you can also look at it into establishing it into a future issue. You know, that's the potential opportunity for you for that to happen. Anyway, let's go back to this. Okay, let's go back to this and let's see what you can establish as a possible cause for some issues which you might want to test out. These are just examples. You may want to try it out here. You may want to try out and see what how can you identify possible causes of why there is always interrupted Wi-Fi connection in FSTM or any of your faculties. Okay, maybe you want to look into possible causes why our FSTM students are not preferred over other university students. Maybe you want to look into potential causes that might delay the development of your new products. What are the possible causes of food poisoning cases in Malaysia? Well, if you can do a 5 whys, but these questions can be so huge, they're so complex. So it would need some, a lot of ideas from you to actually be able to establish some kind of action to be taken. But before you take any kind of action, maybe just figure out as many of the possible causes first and trying to address it first. So if your problem here is your bad coffee, or your problem here is your food poisoning cases in Malaysia, if your problem here is the no Wi-Fi, the problem here is unable to identify the delays, possible delays, right? Use that as a, what would you use that as in a fishbone? You can use that as a possible 5 whys. You can use that as just general questions in terms of the what, whys, and why is this happening? Yeah, try and establish this. This is towards the end of the session already, but the idea is for you to actually just be able to test it out. Okay, we've got a chat here. Okay, so just test it out. So I'm going to break you up into 4 groups again. You have a little bit more time now, maybe about 10 to 15 minutes, and see which of these you would like to try out. Okay, you can select your own problem, your own list of issues, or your potential cause, and then try and see whether you can do a fishbone analysis or any other tool which you feel can help with your problem solving or addressing this improvement, addressing the gap to be improved. Are we clear?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's give it a shot.
Connection in term of dia punya apa dia panggil initiative faktor individu kan, faktor student.
QU, betul?
determination.
Saya jadi SU saya tulis je ni.
Okey je
Nanti
sebab
SU
sebab
kena
you
present.
ada
Tak ada. Dia otai ni. Dia cakap semua point ada ni.
apa saya bagi point je.
Betul tu. I think Prof dah mentions most of the good points. Yeah.
Ya memang cause je lah. Dia kira orang kata apa root cause of the problem.
Facilities tu dia.
Facilities. Kan? Saya sebut yang tadi facility.
How are we doing here, Doctor? Oh, you only 2.
Maybe. Yeah.
Did we get a problem statement?
The problem statement. Right now, we're just listing possible causes of why FCM student is not preferred over the other. So, should I mention to you all the possible reasons here or later?
No. Remember, I'm not supposed to interfere. Anyway, your problem statement is why the students
DPM students not preferred over other.
Yeah. So there is there is a clear issue there, yeah? Very good. Yeah. And then you're listing out as many of the issues there as possible. Well done. Good.
Makin kurang je.
So that was pretty good. Some of you made very clear problem statements. Would it be useful for you in some faculty discussions, or in some department meetings, or even in your project management discussions sometimes with your students? Would this be useful in any way?
Yep, definitely.
Yes. Yes, I agree.
Remember that whenever there are these issues to be addressed, let me stop the share. What am I doing? Oh, so many. There it is. Remember that when we are addressing the issue, and if you think it is a problem, then you make these problem statements, right? And if you are putting out all these possible causes, remember that it's forcing you to think about the possible causes first, and then only do you start verifying to see whether is this for real or not, is this really going to happen or not. Then only do you start taking action. So there's a tendency for all of us, perhaps from the way we were brought up, the way we were in school, everybody keep quiet, listen, that kind of thing. So you have this tendency of just following rules most of the time. And you ask questions during your class, and sometimes only one or two will answer, but most of them generally stay quiet. So this need to actually bring up as much excitement into your classrooms, and to be able to push them, to make them think about this is the most important. Okay, so I'll just run through the last few slides very quickly. Thank you for those who have to leave. It's all right. Okay. You have, the tools are not specific for any one problem or one decision to be made. If it is a whole issue and a whole situation, you can actually think about what is just the general gap that you want to improve. And then you combine it with the 5 whys to try to get ideas and information to see what it is that is causing all this non-performance. And then based on the data, and then if you have data, you can actually do a Pareto to actually verify your issue, verify the ones that you're going to focus on next. And then link your action, and then only do an action, and then link your actions to every point that was causing the issue. There is this paper that I have sent to you, and it's actually using many tools in a very big way. So they start by defining the problem, for example, and then they measure, and then they analyze, and then they improve, and then they control. So they go into Pareto, they go into measuring the data, they find out what is the possible causes, they look into the improvement steps, and then they do the data again to show that there is a difference between what it was before and what's now. So this overall looking into these big issues, it's called planning, deciding, checking, and analyzing. And you're doing this in a continuous way. So this is a PDCA cycle, which tells you to continuously improve. You can't address the entire gap all at once, right? It will take a few minutes for you to, it will take you a few rounds of analysis to be able to do the actions and the improvements little by little. And hopefully you will get it there. This is another study from a hotel service looking into what ways they can actually improve on it. And they were doing it in stages. So with the Pareto, they will tell them what would be the main things to focus on first, and then they will slowly look into all the other issues and tackle them one by one. In summary, what will you change? Okay, what will you find useful, and how will you make these changes happen in your life, in your career, in your meetings, in your classrooms? When you go to when you do an audit at an SME one day, what is it? How are you going to look at it? Will it change the way you address your criticism on the areas that they need to improve on? What will you change in your classroom approach to enable critical thinking in class? So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. If this was useful, which of the tools did you find most useful? What do you think you will make use of, if at all?
I think it's useful for defining your problem statement for research.
Yes.
Agree.
Yeah, because it focuses you into a more specific area, and all the actions that you're going to take, all the analysis you're going to take is going to address, is it going to meet that objective or not? Is it going to meet that problem statement or not? Correct, very good. Anyone else?
Decision making in life as well.
Oh, yes, it is. Setting yourselves into a clear position into what exactly it is that you want. Don't jump to conclusions, yeah? Don't jump to a fix. Even when you're dealing with difficult behavior, children, students, don't jump to conclusions. It is not fixing. It is actually listening and asking a lot of questions, and sometimes they themselves will find a decision that they have to make, they have not made all this time. And when it is their idea, it gives them the confidence to carry it out, rather than being dictated on what it is you want to do. Anyone else would like to share? My intention is just to provide ideas, yeah, with these tools to enable some kind of systematic thinking, critical thinking, and hopefully they can be applied in your teaching projects. If there are no more questions, or if there are questions, please ask. Otherwise,
Puan Suhaila.
Saya.
Assalamualaikum, saya Nur Azman daripada CPA.
Yes, Nur Azman.
Okay, thank you very much for the session. I think very interesting. But the main thing is how we are be able to apply the content that you have shared. Very, very good and technical content. But as far as academics is concerned, we try to relate that to teaching, assessment, kind of things. But yes. I think somehow or other it can somehow or other apply depending on context, depending on what is the purpose of assessment. So for example, like control chart just now, for example, for lab work, especially for food tech kind of thing, katakan, for example, we want to time our student punya activities kan. So kita boleh je buat control chart. So those are within time, those are beyond time. So we can make some scoring. Those who actually has managed to have their job done on time or beyond the limited time too.
Yes, that's
so
right.
We can categorize their real score.
Yes, when in control charts, in control charts, when you're looking at outliers, you address the outliers, right? You don't address across the board. Just because one person or two people are not performing, everybody is affected. That's not fair, kan?
It is also very useful also to be able to identify problematic student kind of things, so they can give different attention to the student.
Wonderful, wonderful, doctor. Well done.
On Pareto, just now, I think very interesting, but need some time to apply it. For example, in prioritizing our scope of syllabus, kadang kita within a semester we have about 10 topics, but certainly each of those topics may not have equivalent weightage, kan? Term of importance, which one they want to stress more. which one are the most critical topic or chapters within the entire one semester punya tu, punya syllabus. Then we can prioritize them. For example, for introduction kind of things, just 10% weightage, but for any technical calculation or technical specific to the course, so the weightage supposed to be different, and we can prioritize that kind of things lah.
Yes.
Maybe on the aspect of assessment, maybe some technical and non-technical assessment we can prioritize. Technical are those crucial, critical, and non-technical maybe about 10-20%. So we can prioritize in terms of assessment depending on the weightage that you can put within the syllabus that we are going to conduct throughout the semester kan. So that dari segi prioritizing soalan dan sebagainya kan, it could be a compulsory question and option punya question. So yang critical topic, critical chapter tu is a compulsory question, and the rest then we can categorize the rest on apa kita panggil yang bagi student alternative tu kan. On SWOT pun menarik. On SWOT pun menarik tadi. So that ni for administrative is very good lah. For administrative, for example, you want to make a comparison between local and international student. Strength and weaknesses of local and international to be compared between gender, between cohort. For administrative purpose, something you can sit down and make a specific assessment on the different strength and weaknesses of our different category of students kan. And itu je yang saya tahu. On very good exercise on problem solving just now kan, and also brainstorming. I think this can be good for class exercise also.
Excellent.
And, okay,
wonderful, Doctor. Yes, you're very welcome. Would anyone else like to share? If not, thank you everyone for a wonderful sharing. Remember that these quality control tools are actually meant to achieve very high quality in terms of you, your students, your whatever it is that you are producing. Yeah. So keep on pursuing and keep on improving. Thank you very much, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Pontiana. I would just like to say thank you very much as the head of Department of Food Science and maybe Faculty of Food Science and Technology. I would like to thank Puan Suhaila very, very much for the very interesting talk. We learned a lot today, Alhamdulillah. Like what Prof. Azman said, we can use all the tools that have been taught to us today to use in our student assessment to increase the critical thinking, because you know every time when we have this jawatan kuasa pengajian program, always I think the industry will say our students lacking in CTPS, right? So by doing this exercise, I think we can enhance more of student learning experience lah, insyaAllah. Okay, thank you very much, Puan Su. Very, very interesting session. Hope we will do it again. Yeah, insyaAllah.
Yeah, insyaAllah, boleh. Thank you, everyone. Okay, be safe. All right.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Puan Suhaila.
Sama-sama. Thank you. Thank you.
Jana nak ambil gambar dulu ke? Should we take a picture?
Boleh, sekejap ya.
Ramai yang dah keluar.
Ramai yang dah keluar. Tak apa.
Boleh je sekarang Boleh on kamera yang lain.
Banyak semua.
Hana dulu, set. Okay. Thank you, Doctor.
Right, thank you.
Puan Suhaila.
Bye-bye, thank you.
Nak lapis kat mana ni? Nak pergi jaga.